So you just downloaded GameMaker and are ready to get started on your game development journey. Maybe you already know exactly what game you want to make, or maybe you're here looking for inspiration. In this video, I'm going to break down the best and worst project ideas for brand new developers. I'll explain what makes one idea a good place to start and another a bigger challenge than you might expect. And not to be super clickbaity about it, but the #1 best project is probably going to surprise you. So stick around. But before we get to the countdown, I want to quickly touch on 5 generally bad ideas that I recommend avoiding until you are more experienced with GameMaker. To be clear, when I discourage certain things throughout this video, I'm not saying GameMaker can't do this stuff. If you've seen a specific feature in another game, it is possible to do it in GameMaker. It's all just a matter of how much effort, skill, and experience it requires to pull off. Yes, GameMaker is capable of creating 3D games. There are some very skilled, and maybe a bit insane, people doing some amazing things with GameMaker in 3D. But this should be viewed in the same light as a skilled artist creating an incredible masterpiece in MS Paint. Building 3D games in GameMaker is a huge pain. There are no built-in tools or systems for 3D physics or collisions, working with 3D models, animations, or materials, 3D lighting, or building 3D levels. You'll be doing all of this using external tools or completely on your own. If you attempt it, you'll learn a lot about how 3D graphics and assets work, like at the lowest level, but you probably will spend all of your time doing that instead of actually making a game. If you really want to do it though, check out Dragonite Spam's channel. There are about 3,000 videos that walk you through everything you'll need to know. Along those same lines, GM isn't set up great to render your game in a classic isometric perspective. The room editor isn't equipped to help you design and build levels in this perspective, and proper depth sorting can be torture. If you want this aesthetic in your GameMaker project, I usually recommend putting some very tight restrictions on yourself in order to make it easier, such as having grid-based movement or limiting your game world to a single elevation like Diablo 1. I get the appeal. We all want to make a game we can play online with our friends, but building a game that works online is its very own skill set. It's not as easy as just building your game and then slapping online multiplayer on top of it. Games generally have to be made in a very careful way to make supporting online not a total nightmare. Trying to learn how to do that while trying to learn GameMaker and game dev in general is it just seems like a lot to take on. I can actually feel a lot of you scowling at me right now, but let me explain. Generating things procedurally usually means working with data. So before you attempt it, you need to be very familiar with structs and arrays, or else you are going to really struggle. Beyond that, games are not good because of random elements. The random elements can add a lot of depth and replayability, but it is not what makes the game fun. Consider this. Binding of Isaac is one of the greatest roguelikes of all time. However, your first playthrough is a more limited experience, and the game expands with new floors, paths, and items as you start stacking victories. Now, imagine if until you beat Mom for the first time, there was zero randomness. Same floor layout, same enemies, same items. Is it a bad game now? No, it's still Binding of Isaac and would still be a blast to play. It might even be easier for new players. They can learn the basics of the game without contending with the randomness. I think that the same concept extends to game development. You need to focus on making a fun game first and foremost. Then you can learn how to add random elements to that game. You should build handcrafted levels first, if for no other reason than to learn what makes a level fun in the first place. How can you teach a computer to build a fun level if you don't know how to build a fun level? There are a lot of these engines out there, template projects that give you the basic functionality for a specific type of game. There's Undertale engines, Sonic engines, Pizza Tower engines, fighting game engines, etc. These have always occupied a very strange place for me. In my opinion, Trying to learn GameMaker while at the same time trying to learn a specific engine is just overwhelming. Even if it is generally pretty good, well-coded, well-designed, and actively maintained and documented, which rarely is the case, you're basically learning two things at once. I recommend getting comfortable with GameMaker itself before trying to utilize any of these template projects. Because if you get stuck while trying to use the template, there are unlikely to be a lot of resources available to help you. But there are a lot of resources available for learning GameMaker and getting help with GameMaker. And once you get comfortable, you may go back to that engine and realize you don't really like how it works at all. All right, with those out of the way, let's get to the internet's favorite thing, the numbered list. Obviously, this entire list is based on my personal biases, but I think platformers are just generally hard. Collision checking in GameMaker can be a bit finicky. Add gravity and momentum into the mix, and things get straight up complicated. Maybe that's just a me thing. You should really master the basics before attempting to tackle features like slopes, moving platforms, jump through platforms, springs, and all of the things that make a Sonic game a Sonic game. If you want an idea of what kind of logic is involved with building Sonic-like movement and collision detection, check out the Sonic Physics Guide on sonicretro.org. There's a link in the description. It's... wow. However, there's a good chance that you do want to make a platformer. I recommend trying to stick to the more basic kind. Classic NES games like Castlevania, Mega Man, Ninja Gaiden, and Metroid are still pretty complicated, but slowing things down and working with mostly square collision blocks can really simplify things. Level design in these games tends to be focused on small, manageable rooms that link together into larger levels or game worlds. The enemies in these games tend to be very basic. They're ultimately just moving obstacles that follow basic rules, so you won't have to worry about complex AI systems. With projects like these, you can focus on learning the basics of collisions, player input, character states, level building, and game progression. They are definitely not easy, but far from the worst place to get started. Go ahead, leave a mean comment. It's just going to improve the video's engagement, but seriously, this isn't rage bait. I know there is a not insignificant percentage of people who picked up GameMaker specifically because of Undertale and Deltarune. Doesn't make it a good place to start. RPGs are complicated. Almost everything about them is complicated. Turn-based games are, surprisingly, more difficult to make than a real-time game. You have complicated characters and enemies with levels, stats, skills, equipment, and items they can use. You have boatloads of menus and complex UI. There's dialogue and cutscenes. Holy crap, cutscenes can be such a pain. There's tons of data you have to manage, save, and load. And they are just big games. It's really hard to make a small JRPG. There's always going to be so much art to create, so much text to write, and so many systems to build that all have to work together. Are there people who downloaded GameMaker, clicked create new project, and then just built an RPG that they eventually finished and released? Maybe, but I guess I could count them on one hand, even if I was missing a few fingers. You might already be noticing a theme with the best list. Classic games are more simple, and that lets you focus on learning things while still making progress and not getting bogged down by an avalanche of features, systems, and modern expectations. The original Legend of Zelda is like, well, let's just say this could easily have been #1 on this list. If you eventually want to build an RPG of any kind, I think this is the best place to start. It's real time instead of turn-based. The combat almost couldn't be more simple. Your inventory is generally pretty limited. Top-down collision checking is straightforward compared to platformers. There's limited text and dialogue, and only a few cutscenes if they can even be called that. The enemies, including the bosses, don't have complicated AI, but even so, it all comes together into an extremely engaging game that people still play 40 years later. You'll learn collisions, finite state machines, world design, and saving and loading persistent data. Check out Crystallis on the NES or Secret of Mana on the Super Nintendo if you're really up for a challenge. Ultimately, if you want to jump into the deep end of game development without starting from a much more simple Atari-style arcade game, this is where I recommend starting. Card games can be insanely complicated. That's the nature of cards. They set the rules, and it's the variety of ways in which a card changes, modifies, or breaks the core rules of the game that makes that game interesting. That means a card isn't just a piece of art and some stats, it's basically a game in and of itself. Let's look at a Magic card real fast and talk about what it would mean to try to support that card in the context of a video game. Dragons you control have Indestructible. So Indestructible is a sort of status effect that changes how cards in play are interacted with. So you need a system for applying that effect to other cards in play and removing it when this card is removed from play. At the beginning of your upkeep, for each color, put a +1/+1 counter on a dragon you control of that color. Okay, so now this is going to require some interface. The game will need to pause and allow the player the opportunity to select up to 5 dragons to add the counter to. So this UI that you have to build has to know that it can select only dragons and only 1 dragon per color and with a limit of 5. Once you've selected them, you apply the counters, which makes the individual dragon stronger, which is another status effect. If you put a +1/+1 counter on 5 dragons this way, you win the game. So if during the upkeep phase, the player has 5 different dragons in play and each is a different color, the game is over. This is a completely different win condition for the game. Try to think about how you would code that, especially if you're attempted to make a card game. Really, stop and think how you would go about building a single card that can affect other cards in many different ways, has its own unique target selection logic, and affects the overall gameplay loop with a brand new arbitrary win condition. Now, obviously, this is a bit of an extreme example, and you could have dozens of cards in your game that are just basic spells or creatures that don't really do anything special. But it's these types of rule-shifting cards that make card games appealing. They inspire your player to build unique decks and experiment with special combinations. And those combinations are one more layer on top of getting just this card to work. Building your game carefully so that you aren't filling your code base with special case blocks of code for every combination of cards like this is crucial. And it's not a skill any new developer has. Oh, and card games are turn-based, so that's another point against them. Scrolling shooters have been a staple video game genre for over 40 years. The gameplay itself almost couldn't be easier. Move ship, fire bullet, Hit thing with bullet, win. Get hit by bullet, lose. The most complicated part of building one of these is how to design your levels and enemy spawns. It's a great opportunity to learn the room editor and maybe experiment with sequences if that's how you want to design your waves of enemies. Beyond that, enemy behavior itself is typically pattern or path-based if they do anything more complicated than move from one side of the screen to the other. So again, we avoid tackling complicated enemy behaviors. And once you've got the foundation, these are a lot of fun to expand on. You can add different weapons and power attacks like laser attacks or screen clearing bombs. You can design big bosses that have unique weak spots and fill the screen with fun bullet patterns. You could spend weeks juicing up the experience with large explosions, flashy effects, and fun responsive UI, while the core of the gameplay and progression stays simple and focused. It's not a bad place to start experimenting with couch co-op either. I want to hammer this point home because it's really counterintuitive. GameMaker is sort of ready-made to build real-time games. It takes a lot of effort to have things happen in a turn-limited fashion, and a lot of experience to do it in a clean, maintainable way. Turn-based typically means that the system that drives gameplay is all data-based, meaning when the player chooses an action, the results of that action happens immediately under the hood. If I target an enemy and say attack, as soon as I've locked in my choice, there is nothing to stop the game from calculating how much damage I did, knowing if that killed the enemy, and any chain reactions that might happen beyond that. The only reason it isn't instant is so the game can play a cool animation to show the player what happened. It essentially builds a cutscene dynamically for you to watch how your decision plays out. A tactical game takes all the characters, enemies, items, dialogue, cutscenes, and raw data of a normal JRPG and dramatically increases the complexity by having large-scale battles on sprawling grid-based battlefields. Trying to build a tactical game without a firm grasp of how to work with complicated data in GameMaker is going to bury you. You'll want to be extremely comfortable with arrays, structs, and constructors. On top of that, these games always have lots of menus. If you've never built a menu in GameMaker, go give it a shot. Just build a simple title screen and then come back and tell me in the comments how excited you are to build something like this. As if that wasn't bad enough, think about AI requirements. Designing and building an interesting encounter in a typical JRPG isn't too hard. Bosses just have special abilities and they choose when to use them. But now it's not just when, but where. Your AI-controlled entities have to navigate a complex, ever-changing battlefield and be smart enough to put up a decent fight against a human player without being perfect and making the game impossibly difficult. I'm realizing that this list of best beginner projects is really kind of anticlimactic. We're sort of going from the most interesting games to the least interesting games, and that isn't making these higher ranked projects seem very appealing. And maybe that's why I feel like this list is important. The game you want to make is in all likelihood not a very good place to start. These classic arcade and Atari games are simple. They were often made by one dude over the course of a week using hardware that is more primitive than my microwave. But they can still present a lot of challenges for brand new developers. You'll learn the absolute basics of graphics, player input, movement and collision, setting up victory and defeat conditions, keeping score, and simple opponent behaviors. And you'll do all that without needing a ton of detailed graphics or high-fidelity sound effects. They may not be very exciting, but they are small, focused, and achievable. Learning a new skill is already hard enough. I recommend not making it any more challenging than it has to be. Fighting games are so complicated. Yes, even the classic ones. And while it is absolutely possible to make one in GameMaker, Rivals of Aether is a GM game, this is not the place to start your game dev journey. Fighting games require an expert level understanding of so many systems. Collision detection in fighting games is never about one rectangle touching another. Fighters often have complicated maps of collision masks that detail where they deal and receive damage for every frame of every animation. There is no built-in system in GM to help you do this sort of thing. And player input management doesn't get any more complicated than this. They have to be responsive, and you'll have to know how to check if a certain combination of buttons was pressed in the proper sequence, or if this button was held for 2 seconds before this button was pressed. Woof. Don't get me started on the AI requirements. I don't think nearly enough people appreciate what an incredible feat it is that Smash Bros. AI opponents so effortlessly navigate complicated levels like this by utilizing the unique skills of each playable character. Not to mention the AI that controls the actual fighting behavior at varying degrees of difficulty. Beyond the technical, the art and animation requirements are extreme. Fighting game characters typically have hundreds of frames of animations, unique sounds and voices, and multiple alternate costumes. And few games in the genre release with less than a dozen fighters these days. The amount of art and sound required for a full game is staggering. A project like this could take a single indie dev a decade, even if they were already a skilled developer. Maybe this kind of undercuts the entire purpose of this video, and I have peers who don't exactly agree with me on this, but hear me out. You'll often hear people say, make small games, do game jams, get in the habit of finishing projects, and that is all objectively good advice. I even wrote an article years ago about making something called a 5-minute game, a game that can be 100% experienced within 5 minutes, Flappy Bird being the premier example. But many developers, no, humans in general don't like being told that they've dreamed too big, that they are too ambitious, that they are going to fail unless they simplify and scale back. Being confronted with that advice can often be very demotivating. You want to work on your game. That's what got you to download GameMaker. That's what got you to watch tutorial videos and ask questions on Discord and the forums. It's what gets you to the keyboard every single day. And that is what's most important. I agree that a smaller scope project can teach you a lot, even if it's not the game you want to make. But for some, it just kills the motivation. If that's you, if you've been told your game is too big and you should go make Pong first and it felt physically painful, then just make your big game. Make your JRPG with a huge world connected by 2D Sonic the Hedgehog levels and random encounters that take place on a huge grid with card-based or fighting game-like battles. If that's what gets you to the keyboard every day, nothing else matters. You may not make it very far, and in all likelihood, you will never finish that game. You will write a lot of bad code, but you'll get better. And then you'll hate your bad code you wrote last month and want to immediately rewrite it. Or you'll do the exact opposite, obsessing over doing everything perfectly the first time, trying to avoid those rewrites and never making any tangible progress. But every day spent working, every line of code you write, every sprite you draw, every feature you add and bug you fix moves you closer to achieving your dreams in one way or another. You'll continue to learn and to grow. And with some tenacity and perseverance, you will eventually finish that 100% science-based Dragon MMO. Good luck and Godspeed. And that's the list. Now it's time for the engagement bait. What's your advice for new developers? What type of games do you think they should make or avoid? I didn't mention rhythm games. Do you think that's a good project to start with? Maybe you disagree with something I said in this video. It's hard as... No, probably not. Let me know in the comments. If you like this video and want me to keep making them, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and generally help make number go up. And if you want to hang out with other GameMaker users, you should join the official GM Discord server. There's a link in the description. Thanks for watching. Now go make something awesome. Special thanks to my Cash Cardinals, DJ Gibbles, Fixing the Stupid, and Peter Jorgensen.